That's right, everybody. That is right. Those courses launched last week, and it was a blast. And right here on Perspective Shift, we talked about it, and I gave you a bit of a behind-the-scenes peek. Well, I don't know if it was really behind the scenes. It was more like just pull back the curtain and be like, hey, this is what the courses are like. So if you're curious about those UnClobber online courses, again, you can go to unclobber.com, or you can watch last week's Perspective Shift live show, which is what you're watching now. Hi, everyone. My name's Colby, and today we're going to talk about the gifts of being transgender with my new friend, Ashton Colby. Look at that. Our names are like a palindrome. Ashton Colby Martin. I don't know if that actually works or not. But that's going to come up later in the show. Before we do that, though, I'm going to read today's Perspective Shift article with you about the glasses of privilege, I think is what I called it. But anyway, glad you're here. I see you. Massage works. Fred, you can watch on whatever platform you like. Well, not really. It's either Facebook or YouTube. If you want to watch on the Twitters, I don't stream there. Maybe I should. I don't know. I've kind of ignored Twitter. Twitter makes me uncomfortable. But I like YouTube because it streams in 1080p, whereas Facebook limits to 720p. But I guess most people probably don't care about that. Anyway, glad you're here, everyone. Let's get going. I almost said welcome to the Kate and Colby show. That is not this show. There's no Kate. Okay. Yes. Hello, Donna. Hello, Donna, who says hello to everyone. Glad you are here. Hello, Jesse, who also says hi to everyone. Everyone gets a hi from Jesse and Donna. Also, Jesse loves Ashton, so that's fun. Got a circle of love going on. Starkovich is in the house. Hello, Starkovich. Glad you're here. James, so glad to have you as well. As always, let me know where you're watching from, if you would like. And that could be geographically where you're watching from. That could be what emotional state you're watching from. Are you watching from a state of joy, a state of anxiety? Are you watching from a place of calm, a place of chaos? Or you can just be like, I'm watching from Florida. That's fine too. But anyway, glad you're with me here today on Perspective Shift. If you are watching on the Facebook, I'd invite you, if you would like, again, this is up to you. It's a free show either way. It doesn't really matter, but you can click like on my page if you want. And if you're watching on the YouTubes, you can click subscribe if you want. Again, these are totally optional things for you to do. And if you missed the opening, I just want to remind you that I recently released my UnClobber online courses into the world. So this is like an accessible / in-depth dive into the clobber passages. What are the clobber passages? So glad you asked. They are the 6 verses in the Bible that have historically been misused to justify discrimination against those who identify as lesbian, gay, transgender, bisexual, queer. I think I got them all. And I wrote a book about it called UnClobber, as most of you know. And then last week, I also revealed that I have created these online courses. And now if you want, for the month of June, you can use the promo code PRIDE21 to save 21%. And last week I said, if you want to wait 79 more years, we can get to Pride 100 and it will be entirely free. That's all. Okay. Here's what we're going to do. Here's how I often like to start this show is I'm going to put a little computer screen right here, and then we're going to go through together this morning's Perspective Shift article. What's Perspective Shift, you ask? It is my weekly newsletter that you can see the little URL scrolling across the bottom here. At any time in your life, you can go to colbymartin.substack.com and sign up. Again, free. It's a newsletter, and I send it out every Wednesday morning. And I like to write about religion and spirituality and psychology. Those are kind of the things that I like to write about most. And today, we are going to get into the idea of privilege. All right. And then we're going to get to our special guest, Ashton Colby, who's going to be joining us here in about 15 or 20 minutes. So let's get into it without any further ado than I've already done. And we're going to talk about the glasses of privilege. First, I'm going to see if anyone told me what state of being they're watching from, or if they just went location. We got Connie from Ventura. What's up, Connie? Glad you're here with us. We got the UK represented. Glad you're here, Brooke. We got Virginia. Hi, Barry. Good to see you again. Pennsylvania. Corey's in the house. Corey, I thought you were I thought you were Nashville. I thought you were Grace Point. Are you a virtual Grace Pointer? Is that what happened? You're watching from the Taco Bell drive-thru. That's fun, Jesse. What are you getting? What is your Taco Bell order? I'm a Crunchwrap Supreme kind of guy. And I also love the Doritos tacos. No shame in that. Yes, we got Wichita Falls. I guess if you just want to skip through a couple letters, there's Wichita Falls, Texas. I love that. Atlanta. Phil's representing Atlanta. Kenneth. Hey, Kenneth. Haven't seen you in a while. It's good to have you on here. And as always, we got Donna representing the WA. Amy, who I said Amy Algie during the countdown. And I'm like, you can't hear me, but I'm almost certainly mispronouncing your last name. I'm sorry. I imagine that happens to you often. Oh, Justin, what's up, man? Glad you're here. Love the work that SDA Kinship does. New Zealand, Olivia is back. So glad to have you, Olivia. We are trans global. Wait, is that correct? Would that be like, Ashton, would that mean we're going to a different globe? I think that means we'd have Martians. Maybe we're not. I don't know. Ashton is not on here to talk about cosmology. Wait, cosmology? Is that the study of planets? You guys, I told you, I write about religion, spirituality, and sometimes psychology. The rest of the topics, I've got nothing. Okay, Corey is a virtual member. All right, and recently an employee. I think I actually heard about that. You're the one. I heard about that. That's so cool that they're doing that. All right, let's dive into this. Let's talk about privilege for a second. And I'm actually going to, in the article, I explained that this is stuff that I've only been scratching the surface of for the last couple years, and I'm not great at this, and I have a lot of work to do, but I'm just putting that as a disclaimer up front before we get into it, even though it shows up about halfway through the article as well. So let's dive into it so we can get on to our guest and talk about the gifts of being transgender, because we are in Pride Month, and that's what I want to do on this show for the month of June. So let's get into this. Start with the question. Have you ever been to a 4D theater? None of that 3D tomfoolery. I want the fourth dimension. Have you ever experienced that? A couple years ago, we took our kids to the Air and Space Museum at Balboa Park here in San Diego. And they have a 4D theater, and it was my first time experiencing it. And I was enthralled at how they used various effects to bring home that felt dimension. You really do end up feeling and experiencing all the things that you're seeing on the screen. You know, yes, you have the 3D glasses that gives a visual depth to the movie, but then they had like these giant fans that are like simulating the wind, and you have seats that kind of rock and move to make you feel like you're actually in this aircraft carrier. You even have small children who crawl up onto your lap because they get scared. Okay, so that wasn't actually provided by the theater. That was my BYOC, bring your own children experience, but it did add dimension to the entire experience. And because all of these dimensions were accessible in this 4D theater, it was this one-of-a-kind immersive experience. It was far more, quote, real than just seeing the same movie, but in 2D. But none of this would have worked without the glasses. It would have just been a noisy, obnoxious, uncomfortable movie. Like, could you imagine watching a 4D movie, but without the glasses? Your chair's moving and the wind's blowing at you, but the screen is like, this is really obnoxious. The glasses are what empower you to see what otherwise you could not see. You get to see the video's depth and nuance and layers. Suddenly they're accessible to you, and they enrich the entire experience. Glasses, specifically the lens part of the glasses, none of these hipster just frames with nothing in them, but the lenses of the glasses, they have enormous power to alter what we see. So I'm a guy who identifies as straight. And as I mentioned earlier, and as most of you know, in 2016, I wrote a book about the way that the Bible has been misused to justify discrimination against specifically homosexuality. More broadly speaking, those who identify LGBTQ. And there's some understandable tension in there. And I get that. Straight guy writing about these things. There's some understandable tension. And so in that vein, I would like to take the next couple of weeks to talk about privilege, a bit about what it is, a bit about how it might function, and maybe how we can begin to own it and steward it, specifically for those like myself who are possessors of multiple layers of privilege. And then here's the disclaimer that I mentioned earlier. I am not an expert in this area by any stretch of the imagination. And to be honest, I have not done this work, I don't think, all that particularly well over the years. These are things that I'm still learning about and I'm still growing into. Here in the States, I don't know if this is as true for you watching in the UK or New Zealand or in Texas, which is a different country. June is the Pride Month here in the States. And so I'm sorry, I just threw some shade at our Texas folk. Amy, apologies are mine. June is Pride Month here. And so it seems like a good time, as good a time as any, to dig into some of this stuff. And I also changed some of my color palette behind me to be a little more pridey this morning. I've got pinks and blues and purples and greens. And so, like I always do, I welcome you to, if you are reading this article later, or if you want to read it later and you want to leave a comment in the comment section, please engage with me on this stuff. And here on the show, engage with me. Like, as always, I welcome your feedback and your comments as we get into this. So today, to help unpack privilege, I want to use this concept of 3D glasses, because I think privilege works in a similar way, only in reverse. So it's like a great metaphor if we allow ourselves to reverse the metaphor, okay? So this is the glasses of, okay, no apologies needed, Amy says. It's all right. Oh, thank you. That's kind of you. So imagine that each area of a person's privilege, and if you're aware of some of the own ways that you are an owner of different types of privilege, you can just imagine how your own areas, imagine each area of privilege as being like a different set of lenses on one pair of glasses. So yes, it could become a pretty thick pair of glasses. But just imagine they're each like different types of lenses. For example, for me, that might mean some of the following lenses. Cisgender, which is a way of naming that my external sense of my gender matches my sort of internal biological sense, like they are cis. In that way, they're lined up. Cisgender, identify as straight, as I said a minute ago, white, middle class, and male. But in this illustration, as I strain this metaphor a bit, each of these lenses, I want you to imagine that they reduce what you can see, that it narrows your field of vision. As you add each one of these lenses, it actually makes it harder to see, and/or it colors and impacts what you do see. So for instance, the straight lens that I wear, it obscures the experience for those who identify LGBTQ. The male lens that I have, it blurs what it's like to be a woman in our society. The middle class lens, it can hinder me from seeing what life is like in poverty. The white lens makes it almost impossible to see the world through the eyes of people of color. And the cisgender lens ensures that I'll need all the help I can get to understand the transgender experience. And you can imagine how all these lenses might stack on each other, and the resultant combination of them create even further alterations to our field of view. This is what's known as intersectionality, the ways that our various identity markers play off each other and then create unique combinations of lived experience in the world. So to keep with this metaphor, we might talk about how to gain awareness that you have these lenses, to gain awareness about them in any one of these particular areas is kind of like removing that lens. Although maybe not entirely, that might not even be possible, but maybe we clean them enough to see through them, or we're suddenly allowed, we're no longer prohibited from seeing the way that the lens sort of naturally hinders us. This is what awareness can do. So for example, when I began the journey of having some awareness around my male privilege, I began to see how the experience of being a female in our society is entirely different. I notice how many aspects of everyday life are slanted toward us as men. I notice how many things women experience that men never will. I learn how certain doors and opportunities are open to some humans more so than others merely by virtue of their genitalia. I see how the world responds differently to men than women. Things like different expectations or different cues and different tones of voice. And then real quick, to better understand this phenomenon, I highly recommend the new book by Paula Stone Williams, good friend of mine. It's called As a Woman, What I Learned About Power, Sex, and the Patriarchy After I Transitioned. And that came out last week. You can get the link for that on the article. Or maybe I'm able to remove some of the smudges of the lenses from my white privilege, and I can begin to see how the world is a radically different place for people of color. In the words of Peggy McIntosh, one of the pioneers of the modern conversation on privilege, and author of that now rather famous essay, White Privilege, Unpacking the Invisible Knapsack, as a white person, I'm struck how, for instance, I'm never asked to speak for all the people of my racial group. I'm really not even seen as a racial group. I'm just seen as the normal. Even in how we talk about it, we have white and then people of color, people that are not that. I get to go home from meetings, most meetings, and most organizations that I belong to, and I feel kind of connected to the group. Like, most people there look like me, rather than this feeling of being isolated or out of place or outnumbered or unheard or held at a distance or feared. I can be sure that if I need legal or medical help, that my race will not work against me. And if my day or my week or my year, if something is going badly in my life, I don't ask of each negative episode or situation whether that had racial overtones to it or not. You know what I mean? So if I'm at a grocery store and there's just a bad interaction with somebody, as often happens, especially as the world's trying to open back up and we forgot how to interact around people, and I'm not even sure we were that great to begin with, but now it's like even worse. I don't walk away from those clunky interactions being like, now did they just talk to me like that because of my skin color? And I don't ever entertain that. And yet for those who people of color, like that is at least a thing that they have to or that enters into their mind. And there's a tax. There's a mental and emotional tax for that I don't pay. Moving on. If I'm fortunate enough to shed the glasses of straight privilege, I get to see a fuller picture of the world around me as I see how LGBTQ people are denied rights that I enjoy simply because I'm attracted to the opposite sex. The awareness of this wakes me up to the realization that growing up, I was just talking about a friend of this last night, that growing up, I never had to wonder what it looked like to date people. I never had to wonder what it looked like or to hold their hand or to have crushes. Like all of this was just modeled for me in culture and on TV and in movies and in music. I never had to consider hiding my feelings or pretend to be attracted to other people. God, that sounds exhausting. I never had to withhold my significant other from my workplace because I wasn't quite sure how people would respond. I never had to question whether or not my vocation was even an option, the thing I want to do in the world. Can I even do that thing? Since being gay has in the past, and in some fields still today, prohibited people from certain work. And then quick plug, if you want to understand the experience of those who are gay or lesbian a little bit better, I recommend Torn by Justin Lee and the upcoming release from Julie Rogers called Out Love. And fun fact, there'll be guests later on the show here in June as well. And then if I can take off these glasses of my middle class privilege, then the world around me is even further detailed and nuanced. These vast dimensions of the human experience become visible as I see how, just because I grew up in a middle-class family, I basically assumed that I could just do stuff in life if I tried hard. Like that was just an ethos that I naturally assumed for myself. Yeah, the world's my oyster. Is that it, right? Is that a saying? The world is my oyster? I don't know. Didn't like seafood until about 10 years ago. I just assumed that college would be the norm if I wanted. Not some far-fetched dream that I needed luck to achieve. I remember getting my first jobs at minimum wage, and my assumption was this is just the beginning of a long, slow climb up some ladder, right? Whereas many people in the world, bagging groceries or working construction or whatever minimum wage, like this might just be the best I can hope for. So what I'm saying is that everyone is born with glasses. Everyone is born with a set of glasses. And then through a unique cocktail of nature and nurture, we develop and or are given various lenses that fill up these glasses, that impact how we see the world. So to talk about privilege is to name how some people are granted lenses almost entirely by virtue of nature, like they were just born with it or they were born into it. Here's the lens that you get to put in your glasses that you did not have, you didn't earn it. You just have it. And those lenses happen to particularly favor you in the world, in this society. And obviously I'm not speaking to everyone who's watching this because not everyone has all of these privileges, but I'm saying this is what these privileged lenses do. Like some particular lenses, if you get them, they work in your favor because the society is bent toward that particular lens. And what I've noticed, and I'm sure many of you have noticed as well, is that as soon as you start talking about privilege, there's inevitably those who object. And I'm like, privilege? Pff, don't tell me I'm privileged. I grew up poor. I didn't have privilege. Or they might say, my life was super hard. Don't tell me that I have privilege. My life was hard. Or I worked my ass off for what I have. Nobody gave it to me. I'm not privileged. But objections like these, they miss the point. They really do miss the point. I understand them. I understand, especially that word privileged. It does have an immediate connotation of things were easy for you. It does have, like, I get that is one of the, so maybe we need different words to help convey this. But these objections, they miss the point. The point is, imagine taking your lenses, whatever they are, and if you swap some of them out for ones that are less favored in society, then suddenly all the obstacles that you did face, because everybody faces obstacles, nobody's life is easy. What I'm saying is if you replace one of those privileged lenses with one of the marginalized or oppressed lenses, then all the obstacles that you faced now become in magnitudes more difficult. Magnitudes more difficult. Whatever effort you had to put in, and I believe you had to put in effort for success. Nobody's saying that if you have privilege, then everything was just given to you and you didn't work hard at all. Of course you worked hard. And exchange some of those privileged lenses for less privileged lenses, and now you're going to have to work even freaking harder, is the point. So yeah, maybe you did. You grew up dirt poor in a divorced home, all sorts of emotional and financial insecurity. But if in this scenario you're white, then can you imagine all of those same factors and consider then if you were black, how might all those factors now be extra challenging? All right. In the article, and I'm going to say it here, I'm not going to belabor the point because in my experience, it can be really, really hard to help people see and understand this concept of privilege if they are just opposed to it outright. It's like no matter how many memes, and there's some great memes out there, no matter how many examples or YouTube videos or stories that you tell, there can often be this huge block for people when they just, I wanted to say cannot see privilege. It feels at times do not want to see. It feels at times like there's so much fear there to actually consider that maybe they aren't entirely who they are because of their own effort. And that's super scary. That can be super scary to have to just begin to question and pull at the threads of who am I if I'm not this idea of the person that I have always thought I was. So there's a lot of fear there. But anyway, so that's why I'm not going to try to argue it too much because it's just a block that, as we've talked about in other episodes of the perspective shift, those blocks can't often be unlocked through mental reasoning. They have to be unlocked through the heart. All right. Anyway, for today, it's enough to establish the basic idea that privilege is like these special lenses that you're given that make life in society a little easier to navigate. And sometimes a lot easier. But point is, at least, if nothing else, a little easier to navigate. That things are weighted in your favor, whether you asked for it or not. This is privilege. And awareness, then, is the process of trying to clear those lenses out or trying to see through them more opaquely. Is that what does opaquely mean? Like you see the, I don't know, it doesn't matter. You get the point. Like we're trying to remove them just enough to begin seeing the depth and the nuance and the colors that are all around us that these lenses have been restricting us from seeing. So the more I am aware of the glasses that I have, glasses with lenses that I didn't earn but were given to me just because I was born, where I was, how I was, to the family that I was, etc., the more that I can make conscious decisions to remove them. And the more that I remove these lenses, the more dimensions of the world around me that I see. The larger the world becomes, the more expansive my own heart can grow, and the more empowered I am to work towards building a world where honestly this concept of privilege becomes a relic of the past. Remember those dear old days when we used to have all these conversations around privilege? Yeah, I don't know if that really exists anymore. I think we've actually done a pretty good job of equalizing the world. Yeah, we're not there yet. We're not there yet. But that's part of the work that I'm doing. Unlike 3D glasses, these glasses of privilege make the world flatter, colder, less interesting, and more harmful of a place. Okay, so that's my article this morning as we embark on a series of talking about privilege, and then also begin our month-long Pride Month conversations where I bring on various guests to share about the experience and the gifts of identifying as L and or G and or B and or T and or Q. All right. I oftentimes will pause and look at some of the comments as I go, but I chose to just plow through that so that we can get to our guest. But yes, if you have any questions, especially for our guest, feel free to drop them into the comment section and we will do our best to get to them in the remaining 28 minutes that we have together. So I would like to now do a warm welcome to the show, Ashton Colby, everybody. What is going on, Ashton Colby? Hi.
So good to see you. So
Well,
good to hang out with you again. How are you?
it is good, isn't it? It's fun.
Good. Yeah.
It's fun to connect with other human beings, albeit through a screen and internet data bits, but it's still good. All right. So, Ashton, we met because you're awesome and you reached out to me. We both were a part of a bit of a social media train wreck insofar as just these YouTube videos that had good intentions, right? Where
Sure.
I do believe that the creator's desire was to put people of opposed, like I think their heart was in the right place. So I was invited on to be the progressive Christian to talk with a conservative Christian about LGBTQ inclusion. I don't know that we ever even got to the freaking topic. There was just so many other weird tangents. And then you were brought on to represent a trans person and an ex-trans person. So someone who had transitioned and then
Yeah.
gone backward. And
Right.
it felt to me like their audience is so slanted that there was no way that we were going to get a fair shake in the comment section. I'm talking about, it's just a train wreck. So I tell people, like, don't watch the videos, unless you're super grounded. Like, it's just going to be a trigger fest. But anyway, that's how we met. And you reached
Yeah.
out and you said, hey, nice name, and also we both did this video.
Right. Yeah. I mean, there's the way we consume media, it makes a difference. There's things that I said were cut out, and I came in with an open heart though, just to share about my trans experience
Yeah.
and just I wanted to. I was curious for myself. I wanted to go in there and just meet somebody and have the time in a container created to talk about God and spirituality with somebody who, yeah, was like myself, who was assigned female at birth, who transitioned to male, taking testosterone like myself. They got their chest surgery to masculinize their chest, just like I did. And then they found their own understanding of the evangelical faith and were called to detransition and to go back to living as a woman. And I can have respect for what anyone's path is, whatever that looks like, and I would hope the same be returned for me, but
Yeah.
it's not always the case. So
Yeah. Well, you
yeah.
did a great job. So I do invite our watchers both now and later to go check out Ashton's video, his conversation. because you do a great job, and give him some love in the comment section. Like I occasionally will scroll
Yeah,
through, and about every 143 comments, there's one that's like nice, and I make sure to like it and say, hey, thank you, I see your comment. So Ashton, thanks so much for accepting my invite to come on today. I got a few things I'd love to ask you and invite you to share about, if you're willing. And the first is this. I'll say it like this. I don't want to ask you to speak for all trans people because I know that's not a thing. And I know that being transgender is not a monolith, that there's great
yeah,
diversity within all of these intersections. That being said, I wonder, are there some things that you think are good or maybe helpful or necessary? Maybe pick one of, or, that sort of vibe for people to like hear and know and understand when it comes to people who are transgender. So imagine people watching this have very little experience with someone who is trans. Like what's something or some things that you think are really good and helpful to know?
yeah. I mean, I just say like, "Hi, I'm a human." Like, my name's Ashton. Like starting there. Like, when I have the space to talk about faith, I'm talking to you, Colby. This is a place where I can say, above any other identity, I identify as a beloved child of God.
Yeah.
I'm not a transgender person, and that's it. And that's the end of my story. Like, there's so much more to who I am, and um, yeah, like there's like faith is really important to me. That's something that like is the cornerstone of who I am way before I am a transgender person. And yet being trans has, like you talked about in the article that you just read, like in the same way that if you have privilege, there are kind of lenses that kind of distort your vision, and you have maybe less compassion for people that have struggled in other ways. The same is true for me in the ways that people layer assumptions on top of me,
Mm,
and they make me feel like that they they don't really get to know, sometimes they don't get to know who I am as a person, my character, how I show up in the world, like my values, my gifts, my talents, my morals, like that they don't care to get to know that. And then just as soon as I give them the gift of knowing that vulnerable part of me, which is, yeah, I am transgender, I haven't always been this guy, like then sometimes I can see people's eyes glaze over, and people go to that place where they reduce me to what's between my legs or what they
yeah.
assume, about my body, and that can feel really um, dehumanizing. And so, I'm a person before I'm a person who just happens to be transgender, and I start with that. Yeah.
Yeah. I love that. Thanks for sharing. You getting some love here in the comment section. Phil says, we're so privileged. I see what you did there, Phil. So privileged to have Ashton here. I agree. Jesse says, yay. Hi, Ashton. Jesse also said, I thought you did a great job representing your story and speaking for other trans Christians like you. I loved what you said in that video. Um, Brooke says, I watched both of those videos last night and thought you were both courageous and dignified throughout. Oh, that's kind. Thanks, Brooke. Um, Ashton, why do you think it is? And I know maybe some of this is speculation, but I think I'm going to trust your speculation to have some expertise and some insight and wisdom into it. Why do you think that the trans experience is so misunderstood by your average person?
Yeah. I would say that I can at least look to the ways that I grew up looking and watching TV, watching movies, and what was shown on the TV was, it is this costume or this caricature. It's not really real. People don't actually live as a transgender person. They're just playing pretend, or they're trying to trick people, or they people get really overly concerned about the surgery aspects of it and the physical aspects of the transition. And it's, I want to honor that it's uncomfortable for people to think about, like, the times that our compassion and empathy is like really stretched is when we have to kind of put ourselves in the shoes of somebody that has a different experience, and usually it's something, a hard experience that they've gone through. And yeah, I mean, people who don't feel at all like they're transgender have very little desire to really go into a heartfelt sense of feeling like your body doesn't align with who you are. Like that feels really claustrophobic. I could just energetically understand why some people would just be so like, I'm not even going to try that thought on, I'm not even going to try that experiment and empathy on it, I'm just going to disregard it, it's disgusting, it's immoral, like, and it just toss it out. But um yeah, I mean, we're at a really interesting place in culture where I didn't even think growing, I kind of felt I was a guy, like a tomboy at some sense. I wasn't able to really feel like I could actually transition. And I came out like 10 years ago, and that was something that I didn't even know was really available to me. I didn't think that people actually transitioned until I found someone on social media that was, on YouTube, like back in 2011, that had
Wow.
transitioned like as a young kid. And so, um, yeah, I mean, media representation distorts stuff. And people don't think that they've actually met a transgender person because, I mean, let's just name it. I'm not visibly transgender at all. Like
Yep.
I've been out for a decade now. I've taken testosterone. I've done all those kind of things, and so people have an idea of what transgender is, and it's not really founded in like who individual trans people are. Like
Yeah.
I I've heard people in passing in the grocery store say, or whatever, say something about transgender people that is really negative without having any consideration that the guy getting the pint of ice cream from the cooler half an aisle down actually is transgender, because they don't put it together that like
Is that because you weren't
there's not
buying the
one way.
trans ice cream?
Yeah. Yeah,
If you
definitely.
would have been
Yeah.
buying the trans ice cream, it would have been a little more obvious.
Totally.
Uh, that point of the absence of representation and or the presence of
Yeah,
excessive misrepresentation, right?
totally.
And
Yeah.
there's a fabulous documentary that my wife keeps telling me I need to watch, that just came out recently. Do you know that of which I speak? I think it's about,
Disclosure, is it on Netflix? Yeah. Laverne Cox.
it might be that. Why did I think it'd have a different name? Doesn't matter.
It's called
Good. Oh,
Disclosure.
okay.
Yeah, I
Maybe
think
that is what
is,
it is.
yeah. I think that's
Um,
what you're talking about. Yeah.
yeah, just about the lack of representation and the presence of misrepresentation. And I, in my own way, like I shared in that article, that I, as a straight guy, I didn't ever think about the fact that it was modeled for me what relationships looked like. It just was. So I could. So it's an effort for me, and this is, trying to remove some of those lenses. It's an effort for me to imagine what would that be like if I were innately attracted to men growing up and never seeing that had any accessibility. Like, how did two guys hold hands? I don't know. Can two guys
Yeah.
date?
I
So
yeah, I was just talking to a friend last week about how um yeah, like I am attracted to women, and I had been like in high school and stuff, and it was really painful to not be able to go to dances and go to homecoming and prom and everything like that with a girl, even though I had that desire, and to not even see that as a possibility model. There was no possibility
yeah,
model. Like we're like, that's kind of my life's work, is like to create a a possibility model that you can be trans and be joyful and have access to a sense of faith and spirituality, and like feel happy with who you are
Yep.
beyond just like
Yep.
your identity, and
Yep.
so it's needed. It's really, really needed. Like we, it's one thing for people to yeah, just again, like reduce, like we don't shake hands with what's between our legs. Like, so I always say that,
I
like
don't think we do. There
I'm
might be some of you out there.
I
Let us know
some of
because
you, I hope not.
that's an interesting
Yeah, like
community.
yeah, I would really just want to bring it back that like we're really all so much more than our bodies. Like
Yep.
from a spiritual perspective, like who you are, the essence of who you are is not your body. Like nobody would say, "Oh yes, I am my
Yep.
body." And so I learned that. I learned
Because like
more of
biologically,
that just through being
your
trans. Yeah,
your body every 7 years is like a basically a brand new thing anyway. Like you are
totally.
recycling
Yeah,
the energy constantly. So to think
yeah,
that you are, yeah, I love that. I have a question for you, and I'm going to prep the viewers because it can sound a little aggressive, but I did send it to Ashton ahead of time and say, I'd love to ask you this question and feel free to respond to it however you want. And Ashton's been incredibly gracious with me the whole time. And the question is this: was it hard for you to transition, and are you still transitioning? And I think that's a question that I'm not even sure if it's the right
yeah.
question to ask, but those are
It's a
kind
good
of
question.
okay. All
Yeah.
right. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I like that question. Yeah. I it was difficult in the sense that I really, really tried very, very hard to not be transgender. Like when
Mm,
I first, throughout high school, like I tried to wear makeup, tried to wear dresses, tried to go to homecoming with boys. I tried so hard to not let any sense of masculinity show to the world. And so when I, went to college my first year, and I was at a religious university, and I was trying to find my way in the world. And really, once I had taken time away from the town I had grown up with, I'm at home, alone at college. I had to realize, like, okay, I'm in an all girls college dorm room. I do not feel like I belong here at all. But then I really enjoyed being at a really Catholic university. I mean, I wasn't raised Catholic, I was raised Methodist, but I just enjoyed the culture of like people really were kind there and really had an intention to get to know people. But I felt like I didn't have the power at that. Again, this was 2011, so 10 years ago. I'd feel like I wasn't allowed to show up as my fullest expression of myself. And that caused me a lot of pain. That caused me a lot of anxiety, a lot of depression. And I had a moment where I kind of questioned like whether or not I should move forward with my life, like whether or not I should even be here on this planet. Like maybe I should just kind of pack it in, call it quits, like and 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 maybe that would be a greater honor to God than to actually go and live and be alive as a transgender person. And I really wasn't living. I was kind of like a shell of a person. And so I had to make a decision, and I was really, yeah, depressed and anxious, and I got some help for mental health in the hospital. And my grandma, on like one of those long corded phones in the hospital hallway,
I remember.
um, yeah, I told
Phones with
her,
cords. That's a whew, taking us
yeah, I,
back.
I told her that I I needed to be a guy to express myself most fullest, and she told me like all God cares about is you just be a good person.
Wow.
And it was as simple as that. But I had never heard it that way, and I had let the fear-based voices of the world and judgment and attack of like, what are people going to think? Am I going to lose everything in my life if I move forward? That was the most hard part. But then once I got some momentum going, and I started taking testosterone. Actually, 9 years ago, uh, uh, last week on June 4th, 2012. So 9 years ago.
Hmm.
Once I started to kind of get some physical changes in my voice crack and my hair and my facial hair and all that, it started to get better for me. So yeah, it was hard. And then you ask about, am I still transitioning? I feel complete with who I am in this moment. There's definitely things that I could do physically. Like, I've only had my chest surgery. I haven't gotten any surgery below the belt, and like I think, oh, maybe I could go get a hysterectomy. Maybe that would improve the quality of my life. Maybe I could go get any kind of other like lower surgery to, I can't stand and go to the bathroom. I have to, I have to sit, and that's kind of a pain in the butt. But there's not. Um, I kind of value that I am just myself, and this is enough for me at this point. So I feel complete, but I'm not. It doesn't look like a one size fits all thing. Like, not everybody gets every surgery, and
Yeah.
yeah. So I'm me for now, and I feel good in my body. I mean, that's the point. Like, why even transition if it's not to just feel better in your
Yeah.
body and who you are? So if that was my goal, so I made that goal. So yeah, I guess I'm done. I guess.
Man, you're so cool. Melissa says, thank you for your vulnerability. I had those thoughts as well. Thank you for sharing that, Melissa. Uh, Amy from Texas, wow, your grandma sounds amazing. I would echo that. Um, yeah, thanks for sharing that. As you were talking, I was remembering the many times I've talked with different friends of mine who are gay, lesbian, and they talk about how coming out is not just a one-time thing, but
Yeah,
they're just kind of always coming out. And so like there's
right.
just always that moment, whether it's with coworkers or people that they meet on the streets, or now they have a kid and they're have to come out to the other parents at the playground. Like there's just this constant I say have to, knowing that we don't, and yet we do, because the society we live in has these expectations, and they're not. I wouldn't say they're necessarily malicious or nefarious expectations. They just are. They just are the water that we've been swimming in for so long, and we're working on changing the water. We're working on changing the expectations a bit. Um, and yet we're still have so far to go. I mean, when you're saying 10 years ago, you were like,
Yeah,
do people transition, or do I just be this
right.
tomboy for the rest of like we've made
Yeah,
significant movement in 10 years, and it's only been 10 years and we have a hell of a lot long farther to go. But yeah, so that was part of what was driving that question. It was like, are you still transitioning? Less even about maybe the physical or emotional, more just like, yeah, are you just, I imagine you run up against that. Like you just, there's a point where like,
yeah,
eventually, I guess I have to tell this person, and just kind of always in that. And again, these are like for my
yeah.
straight cis
Uh-huh.
gendered privileged viewers, like these are things that we don't ever think about. These aren't
Sure.
taxes that we have to pay. These aren't burdens that we carry. And that matters to me that we are aware of that.
Yeah, I love to tell people I am transgender just because it's such an experiment in like sociology of
Okay.
like how people
Yeah.
respond.
Yeah.
Like I share it when it feels, appropriate, and this is what I do. I educate people like as my vocation, and so I am very open about it. There are some times when I'm just like, hey man, I'm just trying to like buy some pancake mix. Like, I don't need to tell you that I'm
That's right.
transgender.
That's right.
But like, that's it's a balance for me of like, and I've had to even negotiate in the last couple years of like, you know, when am I not just a transgender person? When am I, more than that? And that is something that, really have. That's why I started telling people, like, okay, before anything, I'm a beloved child of God. And that has kind of cleared the air for me a bit because bring it back down to earth a little bit. And
Yeah.
for the rest of my life, I'm sure I'll have to keep telling people that I'm transgender just because it's it's been of value to my human experience. Like, I know, like, you were talking about like, privilege and lenses and how that affects how you view the world. Like, me being transgender, I lived 20 years as a woman. I know from a very inherent embodied experience what it is like to walk down a college campus as a girl, what it
Yeah.
is like to uh, just live as a young woman who is white and conventionally attractive. Like I know what that's like, and I know how painful it is to try to, whether I was trans or not, fit in that box. And so I there is so much value in the human experience of like, okay, well now I know what it's like to live as like this white guy that's like perceived as, straight and, cisgender, and but then I have this embodied knowing from a very like compassionate place that unless you've lived it, you don't know. So I think about from like God's perspective, like of course God would want to create humans that have this really divine embodied inner knowing just to like bridge from a compassion place, like beyond what you could tell somebody what the experience is like. Okay, just put people in, maybe put that guy's soul in this girl's body and then have him just figure it out, and then he'll have to just tell people like, hey, my soul is a guy's soul, like just deal with it, and then know what it's like to live 20 years as a woman. Like there is spiritual value there, you know
There's
what anybody
there's
says.
spiritual
So
value there, and I think that's a great segue into the last question I have for you. Is can you speak about how some of the gifts of being
yeah.
transgender, like how eh, for you personally, and then also like how might even cisgender folks like myself, how might we benefit from better knowing and understanding and being in relationship with? But I'd love to know what are some of the things you've been grateful for and the gifts that have come
Yeah.
with being transgender.
Yeah. The awareness that I had that, okay, my inner essence does not match my body was such a profound catalyst for deepening my spiritual awareness and awakening, because I realized like that my soul, my spirit is not, just what I can see and touch, and it's really so much deeper than that. And it allowed me to kind of clear out the noise of society's expectations of like who we're supposed to be based on just the clothes we wear, how people perceive the way we look like, and all of those lessons I could not have learned in the ways that I did unless I really felt on a soul level that the next right action for me was to transition my gender. And so the universal truths that we all, whether trans, not cis, black, gay, whatever, like there's some universal fundamental truths that are true for me and they're true for every single person, which is, you know, you care about your family, you care about your relationships with your friends, you care about the people that you love in your partnerships, you want to have a career or a vocation that's fulfilling and of service to the world, you want to be have a healthy body. It's not like we ignore our bodies. We want to have a healthy body. We want to have, manage our emotions. We want to manage our thoughts. We want to have a spiritual connection to something that bigger than us, that's just pure love. Like all of those things, like those are universal truths that I learned as a result of like transitioning and then realizing like the physical aspects are just kind of the surface level stuff. It really is. Like it's the beginning. It's the beginning of the hero's journey.
Wow.
It's the most first apparent task, but the real stuff
Hmm.
is that inner transformation that
Yeah.
happens. Like I want there to be space in the global narrative about that for trans people, for my own community to know that more fully and to have a better guide roadmap of that, and like, cisgender people to really get that, like, yeah, like it could be kind of confusing on a spiritual level, like why would you change your body? That seems kind of superficial. And it's like it's so much more than that. That may be part of it and the catalyst in the beginning, but like there's all this other stuff going on,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
I'll leave it at that.
I
Yeah.
love that, man. I love that. I love thinking about the way that awareness of your disintegration like fast tracked you to some of
Yeah.
these deeper emotional and spiritual insights. What a gorgeous testimony. Thanks, Ashton.
Yeah.
All right, before I let you
Yeah.
go, tell us a bit about your work in the world. So you created a foundation called Gender YOUphoria, you being
Yeah.
YOU. I love it. So
Spelled YOU.
tell people how they can learn more about you and your work.
Yeah. Totally. Yeah, you can go to Gender YOUphoria, spelled YOU.com, and then AshtonColby.com is just kind of my speaking and stuff. But yeah, I mean, I do this. I'm a trauma informed yoga teacher. I coach trans people through spiritual stuff. I support people in that way. I help trans entrepreneurs and mentor them, and do a lot of cool stuff. Work with companies trying to make them more inclusive, and so a lot of cool things going on.
I love
So
it.
yeah, if you want to probably connect with me, if you want to follow me on Instagram, Ashton James Colby, and then yeah, you could send me an email too. I love hearing from people directly. It's just info@ashtoncolby.com. So
Nice.
I'm all here for you,
You're the
just
best,
to
man.
support anybody that needs it. So,
Thank
yeah,
you. And thank you. So
yeah,
uh, when I was putting this together, y'all watching, there's a couple parts where I had the phrase transgenderism in there. And as I was typing, I'm like, this feels, I've never used this phrase before. I'm trying to say something, but I'm using this phrase. And then when we're doing the tech run through, Ashton's like, hey, it's not a big deal, but if you can change it, would you maybe drop transgenderism and talk about the gifts of just being transgender? And I'm like, thank you. Thank you. That was so kind of you to invite me to drop that term. And then actually, I would love for you to just share really quick why. Why is that? Why might people want to stop
yeah.
using transgenderism? Because I feel like that was a really important
Yeah,
thing that you
like
said.
yeah, I think like terms like transgenderism or calling someone a transgender, like they're really objectifying, and they kind of take the human part of it. I like to say that like I am a transgender person, or I'm part of a transgender community, and like I'm a person that happens to be trans. So it's really important that we remember that. And language is ever changing. You can't. There's no like perfect way to do it. It's just it's kind of interesting that it is the term that you are readily available with, because it is the evangelical faith really does use the term transgenderism to kind of disconnect it and make it some kind of alien pathologized thing, when
That was
like
what
they
hurt the
forget like,
most,
oh,
is I was accidentally
these are
using
purple
a
people.
darling
Yeah,
term of
no,
the evangelical
it's
world. No,
all good.
I did
Yeah,
it. Yeah,
it's all
yeah.
good.
All right.
Yeah,
I
thank you
appreciate
so
you.
much.
Thanks for being thanks for hanging out with me today. Be well. We'll be in
Thank
touch,
you.
all right?
Have a
All
good
right.
one.
Bye.
Thanks.
So that was great. I like that guy a lot, and I really, really love his heart for people, period, end of sentence, new paragraph. Love his heart for transgender people, period, new sentence. Love his heart for guys like myself, and his graciousness and patience for helping to better expand all of our awarenesses on what it means to be trans. And it's just one of many, many things about Ashton. Is that one of many, many things? He's a beloved child of God. That is the jam. All right. Next week, I'm going to be joined by Justin Lee. Justin Lee wrote the book Torn, which is one of the top go-to books in the world of faith and sexuality. And Justin and I we've talked on the phone a couple times. We have messaged through the digital world, but we've never done a face-to-face thing. So that's exciting for me to meet Justin in that way next week. So definitely set an alert to join me next week. And again, if you would like help on the reminders on that and you're on Facebook, you can click like on my page. And I think that will help you know what I'm doing. And same thing with YouTube. You can subscribe to that as well. Just one more reminder that if you would like to check out the UnClobber online courses through the month of June, I'm offering you 21% off with the promo code PRIDE21. And I believe all the links for that should be in the description below, because I try to be helpful. Don't always succeed, but I try. All right. I love you all. Yes. I see you. Mercy says, Ashton, thank you so much for sharing. Thank you for sharing your story with us. Thank you for sharing yourself and all you do. I agree, Jesse. That was so cool. Absolutely beautiful testimony. Y'all are some lovely human beings. All right. Be well, and we will see you next week. Thanks for watching this week's episode of Perspective Shift. I'm going to now invite you to do one of three things, or do them all if you're an overachiever. First, why don't you go ahead and subscribe to my free Perspective Shift newsletter. You can do that by going to colbymartin.substack.com. This will ensure that each week the articles that I write arrive safely in your inbox. Second, if you're watching this on YouTube, just go ahead and hit subscribe on my channel. That'd be awesome. And or if you're watching this on Facebook, would you click like on my page? For me, this is a win-win, in that it helps me know that you're out there and that you care. Plus, it helps you know when I'm going live. For all my other work, including books that I've written or sermons that I've preached, head on over to colbymartinonline.com. Thanks for watching, and I hope you'll join me live next week.